Seriously, Maya? A specialized AI platform for small batch manufacturers? That's your million-dollar idea? Nathan's laughter echoed through our kitchen, bouncing off the granite countertops he'd insisted on during our renovation last year. He wiped an imaginary tear from his eye, his expensive watch glinting under the pendant lights. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Babe, you majored in English literature. You've never coded a day in your life. You wouldn't know artificial intelligence from a toaster oven. He took a casual sip of his 18-year-old scotch, the one he saved for celebrating his own achievements. Stick to what you know. Your little freelance writing gigs pay for your coffee dates. That's enough, isn't it? I said nothing, letting the familiar weight of his dismissal settle across my shoulders. This wasn't the first time Nathan had ridiculed my ambitions, but something felt different tonight. Perhaps it was the research binder I'd spent 6 months compiling, now closed and pushed aside as he continued scrolling through his phone, already having moved on from crushing my dream. Marcus is putting together an investment group for that downtown development, he mentioned casually. We're meeting at the club tomorrow, don't wait up. I nodded, gathering my materials while carefully maintaining the pleasant expression I'd perfected over 7 years of marriage. Nathan never noticed when I withdrew. He only noticed when I wasn't immediately available to orbit his success. In our home office, the smaller, windowless room Nathan had generously designated as my space while he claimed the sun-filled corner room with city views, I reopened my binder. The market analysis, the interviews with frustrated small manufacturers still using outdated systems, the AI architecture I'd developed with Sanjay Gupta, my former college roommate's husband, who now led development at a major tech firm. Nathan didn't know I'd been taking online courses in business and technology for 3 years. He didn't know I'd been building connections across the manufacturing and tech sectors while he assumed I was having coffee dates. He didn't know that tomorrow wasn't just another Tuesday. It was the day I had scheduled a meeting with Aria Venture Partners, a female-focused investment firm that had shown interest in my prototype. I ran my fingers along the business plan. I'd refined through countless sleepless nights. Manufacturing, AI-driven inventory, supply chain, and quality control systems specifically designed for small manufacturers who couldn't afford enterprise solutions but needed more than generic software. My phone buzzed with a text from Sanjay. Final debugging complete. Platform passed all stress tests. We're ready. I took a deep breath and typed back, "Let's do this." Ms. Reynolds, Ms. Kimura will see you now. The receptionist at Aria Ventures led me through gleaming glass doors into a conference room where Yuki Kimura waited, her legendary silver-streaked bob exactly as I'd seen in countless business profiles. 3 other women sat with her, each radiating the polished intensity of people who didn't waste time or money. "Maya," Yuki said, standing to shake my hand. "No pretension, no power plays. Your prototype demonstration impressed our technical team. Today we want to understand the woman behind the innovation." For the next hour, I outlined my vision. Not just the technology, but the philosophy behind manufacturing. How small manufacturers, often family businesses rooted in their communities, were being crushed between megacorporations and overseas competition. How the right technological tools could level the playing field. How my platform learned from each implementation, creating a network effect that would make it increasingly valuable. "Your technical foundation is solid," said Aria's CTO, a former Microsoft executive named Dina Shah. "But your distribution strategy is what caught my attention. Using regional manufacturing associations as entry points is brilliant. The question," Yuki interjected, "is scale. Can you build and lead an organization capable of rapid growth? Your background is unconventional." I smiled, having anticipated this concern. My unconventional background is precisely why manufacturing works. I speak the language of small manufacturers because I grew up in one. My father ran a custom furniture shop in Michigan. I watched automation transform his industry while leaving smaller players behind. I paused, meeting each woman's gaze. For leadership, I've assembled a core team that combines technical expertise with industry experience. Sanjay Gupta has already committed as CTO. Elizabeth Chen from Supply Chain Quarterly will head operations. We're ready to move quickly with the right partner. Yuki sat back, a slight smile playing at her lips. What are you looking for from Arya? $3 million in seed funding for 15% equity. We'll be cash flow positive within 18 months based on current LOIs from regional manufacturing associations. The room fell silent as the four women exchanged glances. Finally, Yuki leaned forward. We're prepared to offer $2 million for 12%, with an additional $1 million milestone-based tranche at the same valuation when you hit 100 clients. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. Make it $2 million for 10% with the milestone. Tranche, and you have a deal. Yuki's smile widened. Done. Our legal team will send term sheets tomorrow. As we shook hands, I felt a surreal sense of transformation. Like I was simultaneously the same woman who had sat silently through Nathan's dismissal last night, and someone entirely new. One last question, Yuki said as we walked to the elevator. Does your husband understand what you're building? The question caught me off guard. He will soon, I replied, the first hint of the complicated truth. 3 months passed in a blur of activity. I rented a small office space in the Innovation District, officially incorporated manufacturing, and began assembling my team. Nathan barely noticed my increased absences, attributing them to my little hobby, and seemingly relieved to have more time for his own pursuits. I hadn't explicitly hidden my progress from him. I simply stopped sharing, weary of his reflexive dismissal. When the first significant chunk of investment capital hit our account, I moved it immediately to a separate business account to which only I had access. Nathan, who had long managed our finances with minimal input from me, didn't notice. The first indication that something had changed came when I missed a dinner with his colleagues, senior partners at the investment firm where he'd built his career managing portfolios for wealthy clients. Where were you? He demanded when I arrived home at 10 p.m., still buzzing from signing our 15th client. Richard was asking about you. It looked bad. I had a work commitment, I replied simply, pouring myself a glass of water. I texted you. Work? You mean another freelance thing? Jesus, Maya. I had the managing partner at our table. This was important. I set down my glass, suddenly tired of the pretense. I was closing a deal with Midwest Manufacturing Coalition. They're implementing our platform across 60 member businesses. Nathan blinked, confusion replacing anger. What platform? What are you talking about? Manufacturing, my specialized AI platform for small manufacturers, the one you laughed at. I kept my voice neutral, not seeking confrontation, but no longer avoiding truth. We launched 3 months ago. We have 15 clients already, with 60 more coming online next quarter. He stared at me like I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. Is this some kind of joke? Would you like to see our website? Our office? The press release that will go out tomorrow announcing the Midwest Manufacturing Coalition deal? His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something harder to define. You've actually been doing this? All this time? Why didn't you tell me? The question was so lacking in self-awareness that I nearly laughed. I did tell you, Nathan. You said I wouldn't know AI from a toaster oven and told me to stick to my coffee dates. His jaw tightened, a familiar sign that he was recalibrating to protect his ego. Well, obviously I didn't have all the information. If you'd properly explained, I had a research binder, a prototype, a business plan. You weren't interested. I spoke without rancor, simply stating facts. It doesn't matter now. Manufacturing is funded, operational, and growing faster than projected. Funded? By whom? His voice sharpened, financial interests suddenly engaged. Aria Venture Partners. 2 million seed round with a milestone tranche. He let out a low whistle, professional respect momentarily overriding his personal discomfort. Yuki Kimura? She's notoriously selective. Yes. A new calculation was happening behind his eyes. I could practically see him reassessing me, restructuring his understanding of our relationship in light of this revelation. We should talk about how this affects our financial planning, he said finally. If you're really generating significant revenue, the company is generating revenue, I corrected. And its finances are separate from our personal accounts, managed by a proper CFO. That landed like a slap. Nathan had always handled our money, making investment decisions and controlling major purchases with minimal consultation. I see. His voice cooled. Well, congratulations on your little startup. I hope it works out. He retreated to his home office then, the conversation apparently concluded. I went to bed alone, neither triumphant nor regretful, simply aware that something fundamental had shifted between us. The Midwest Manufacturing Coalition deal made headlines in industry publications, bringing manufacturing unexpected visibility. Our client waitlist grew, necessitating faster expansion than we'd planned. I hired additional developers, leased larger office space, and began spending most of my time at work. Nathan's attitude oscillated between dismissive and keenly interested, depending on who else was present. At a neighborhood barbecue, I overheard him telling friends, Maya's company is really taking off. We always knew she had entrepreneurial instincts. The "we" struck me as particularly absurd, but I said nothing, letting him construct whatever narrative protected his pride. At home, a strange détente developed. We orbited each other cautiously, our conversations limited to logistics and pleasantries. I found myself relieved by his late nights at the office, using the solitude to work without the weight of his assessment. 6 months after our launch, TechCrunch featured manufacturing in a profile of female-founded AI companies disrupting traditional industries. The article included a photo of me with my leadership team and described our rapid growth. 42 employees, over 100 clients, and a valuation that had tripled since our seed round. Nathan left the magazine open on our kitchen counter, the article highlighted. When I came downstairs that morning, he was waiting with coffee, something he'd never done before. I thought we should talk, he said, gesturing to the article. I think I've underestimated what you're building. I accepted the coffee but remained, standing, suddenly wary of his newfound interest. It's going well, obviously. He smiled, attempting charm. Maya, I don't think you realize the vulnerability you've created here. You're growing too fast without experienced financial leadership. You need someone who understands capital markets, someone who can structure things properly for an eventual exit. We have a CFO, Rebecca Zhang, formerly of Goldman Sachs. His smile tightened. A part-time consultant isn't the same as having senior financial leadership with skin in the game. I sipped my coffee, waiting for what I sensed was coming. I think I should join manufacturing, he said finally. As CFO or Chief Investment Officer, my experience managing 9-figure portfolios would bring immediate credibility with institutional investors, and it would align our family interests properly. Though I'd half expected this, the audacity still stunned me. You want to join the company you laughed at? The one founded by someone who should stick to coffee dates? He had the grace to look momentarily embarrassed. I was wrong, okay? I didn't see the potential, but I see it now, and I can help take it to the next level. Nathan, you've never worked in tech. You've never worked with manufacturers. You've never even used our platform. I don't need to, he countered, dismissiveness creeping back into his tone. Finance is finance. Besides, having a unified front would look better to investors. A husband-wife team has a certain appeal. There it was, the real concern. Not the company's success, but how its success reflected on him. How my independent achievement disrupted the image he'd cultivated of our relationship. "Thank you for the offer," I said carefully. "But we're not hiring at the executive level right now." His expression hardened. "Is that your final answer? Because you should think very carefully about the implications here." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm pointing out reality. We're married. Your company's success affects our joint financial future. If you're cutting me out deliberately..." "I'm running a business, Nathan. Hiring decisions are based on qualifications and fit, not marital status." He stood abruptly. "You know what? Forget it. If you want to play CEO without proper support, that's your choice. Don't come crying to me when you hit the wall that most startups hit." The conversation ended there, but its undercurrents continued to flow through our interactions in the weeks that followed. Nathan began asking pointed questions about manufacturing's operations, revenue projections, and investment strategy, information I was careful not to share in detail. Meanwhile, something more troubling emerged. Small irregularities appeared. In our personal finances, unusual transfers, changed passwords, investment moves I hadn't authorized. When questioned, Nathan cited rebalancing and tax optimization, the same vague terms he'd always used to discourage my deeper engagement with our finances. Increasingly uneasy, I consulted with Rebecca Zhang privately, showing her what limited information I could access. "This looks like someone preparing for conflict," she said bluntly. "I've seen it before in struggling marriages. Have you considered protecting yourself legally?" I hadn't, but her words catalyzed a painful realization. The foundation of trust in my marriage had completely eroded. Perhaps it had never been solid to begin with. The next day, I consulted a divorce attorney who advised immediate documentation of all assets and separation of any remaining joint finances. "From what you've described," she said, "your husband may be positioning for a claim on your company." "He can't do that," I objected. "Manufacturing was formed with outside investment after we were married. I've never used our personal funds." "Arizona is a community property state," she reminded me, "and entrepreneurial ventures can create complex legal questions about when value was actually created. If he can argue that the intellectual foundation was developed during your marriage, using joint resources like your home office, he might claim a portion of the value." The possibility that Nathan might try to claim ownership of something he had openly ridiculed filled me with cold resolve. I authorized the attorney to begin protective measures immediately. That evening, returning home later than usual, I found Nathan in my home office, my laptop open before him. "What are you doing?" I asked from the doorway, my voice steady despite the violation. He jumped slightly, then composed himself. "Looking for our tax documents. I thought they might be on your computer. They're in the filing cabinet, in the folder labeled Taxes, where they've always been." I moved forward, closing the laptop firmly. "Why are you really in here, Nathan?" Our eyes locked, the pretense between us suddenly too flimsy to maintain. "I built this life," he said quietly. "This house, our status, everything we have. And now you're leveraging it all to play entrepreneur while shutting me out completely." "I'm not playing anything. I've built a successful company that's helping hundreds of small businesses compete more effectively. And I did it despite your constant dismissal. So this is revenge? Making me look like a fool because I didn't immediately embrace your amateur business plan?" "This isn't about you at all," I replied, the truth of that statement striking me fully for the first time. It never was. Something in his expression shifted then, a recognition that he'd lost control of a narrative he'd long taken for granted. "I want half," he said flatly. "Half of whatever you've built. Community property laws are very clear." I had prepared for many versions of this confrontation, but the naked entitlement still shocked me. "Manufacturing has 5 other equity holders, including institutional investors with anti-dilution provisions. You can't just demand half of a venture-backed company." "Watch me." He stood, towering over me as he had so many times before. You think your little female investor friends will back you when this gets messy, when every deal gets tied up in litigation, when potential clients hear about the internal ownership disputes? The threat was so explicit, so calculating, that something broke permanently between us in that moment. Are you actually threatening to destroy a company that helps hundreds of small businesses because your ego can't handle that? I succeeded. Without you? I'm stating facts, Nathan replied, his voice coldly professional. As your husband, I'm entitled to half of what you've built during our marriage. If you're not willing to acknowledge that reality by bringing me into the company appropriately, then yes, I'll pursue my interests through other channels. Even if that damages manufacturing, hurts our clients, impacts the livelihoods of our employees? He shrugged. Collateral damage. You should have thought about that before excluding me. In that moment, I saw Nathan with complete clarity, not as the charming, ambitious man I'd married, but as someone who would rather destroy something than see it succeed beyond his control. I think you should leave, I said quietly. This is my house, too. Tonight, I clarified. Stay at your club. Give us both some space before this becomes something neither of us can take back. For a moment, he looked like he might refuse, but then nodded curtly. Fine, but this conversation isn't over. After he left, I sat in the sudden silence of our home, feelings washing through me in waves, anger, sadness, resolution. Then I picked up my phone and called Yuki Kimura. I need your advice, I said when she answered. And possibly your lawyer's. The next morning, before Nathan returned, I convened an emergency meeting with my executive team at manufacturer's offices. I laid out the situation with complete transparency. My marriage was likely ending, and my husband was threatening legal action that could destabilize the company. This isn't just a personal issue, I explained. It's a business threat we need to address proactively. Sanjay, our CTO, looked grim. He can't seriously think he has a claim on manufacturing. He wasn't involved in its development, funding, or operations. Community property laws create complications, Rebecca explained. But we have documentation that Maya developed the concept independently, secured funding without using marital assets, and has operated with proper corporate governance throughout. Elizabeth. Chen, our operations director, was more direct. So your husband laughed at your idea, contributed nothing, and now wants half because you're successful? That's not just legally dubious, it's morally repugnant. I appreciated their outrage, but needed solutions. Yuki has connected us with Arya's legal team. They're preparing for potential litigation, but I'd prefer to avoid that path if possible. A public legal battle could spook potential clients and partners. What does he really want? Asked Rebecca. In my experience, threats like this are usually leverage for something else. That question had kept me awake all night. He wants control, I answered, or at least the appearance of it. He can't accept that I've built something significant without his input or approval. Then maybe we give him the appearance, suggested Elizabeth, her expression calculating. Not actual equity or control, but something that lets him save face. Like, what? I asked, intrigued despite my misgivings. A consultant role. Advisory only. No executive authority. He gets to tell his friends he's involved with the hot new tech company, but he has no actual power over operations or strategy. I considered this. He specifically wanted a C-level position, CFO or Chief Investment Officer. Rebecca snorted. Not happening, but we could create a limited advisory position. Investment relations consultant or something equally vague. No. Equity, contractual restrictions on his activities and communications, and a modest compensation package. Would he accept that? Asked Sanjay skeptically. He might, I said slowly, if it's presented as the only alternative to a very public, very messy legal battle that would damage his professional reputation regardless of outcome. We spent the next hours outlining a strategy, consulting with Arya's legal team, and preparing for various scenarios. By afternoon, I felt equipped to face whatever came next, not just emotionally, but with concrete plans and professional support. When Nathan returned to the house that evening, his combative energy had been replaced by something more calculated. He had clearly consulted his own advisors. "I've been thinking about our situation," he began with artificial reasonability. "Perhaps I was too aggressive yesterday. Obviously, we need to find a solution that works for both of us." "I agree," I replied, matching his tone. "That's why I've had our attorneys prepare some options." The flash of surprise in his eyes was quickly masked. "You've already involved attorneys? That seems premature." "Actually, it was directly responsive to your statement that you intended to pursue your interests through other channels. I'm simply ensuring manufacturing is protected from any actions that might destabilize the company or harm our clients." He took a seat at our kitchen island, attempting to reclaim the casual authority he'd always assumed in our home. "Maya, let's be practical. A legal battle benefits neither of us. It would be expensive, time-consuming, and potentially damaging to the company you've built. On that we agree." "Good." He smiled, confidence returning. "Then let's discuss my role at manufacturing. I've been thinking CFO makes the most sense given my background, with equity comparable to your other C-level executives." I slid a folder across the counter to him. "That won't be possible. What we can offer is outlined here." Nathan opened the folder, his expression darkening as he read. "Investment relations consultant? No equity, no decision-making authority, and compensation less than a junior developer? This is insulting. It's appropriate for someone with no experience in our industry, no history with our company, and no demonstrated commitment to our mission." He closed the folder sharply. "This isn't a negotiation I'm willing to entertain." "Then the alternative is outlined in the second document." He flipped to it, scanning quickly. "A divorce filing with a complete denial of any community property claim on manufacturing? You can't be serious." "Completely serious," I confirmed. "Nathan, I have documented evidence that you dismissed my business concept, contributed no resources to its development, and took no interest until it proved successful. I have multiple witnesses who can testify to your exact words about my capabilities. I'm prepared to make this evidence public if necessary." His face flushed with anger. "You recorded me? I didn't need to. You made your opinions known, widely and repeatedly, to friends, family, colleagues. Your dismissal wasn't a private matter. It was your consistent position." For the first time, uncertainty crept into his expression. "This would get ugly." "Unnecessarily so," I agreed. "The consulting role offers you a dignified connection to a successful company without overreaching. It allows both of us to move forward without destructive litigation." He stood abruptly. "I need to review this with my attorneys." "Of course. We'll expect your response within 48 hours." After he left, I exhaled slowly, the tension of the encounter leaving my body in waves. Whatever happened next, I had stood my ground, not just for myself, but for everything, and everyone connected to manufacturing. The next day passed without word from Nathan. I threw myself into work, grateful for the company's momentum and the support of my team. We were finalizing our Series A funding round, with interest exceeding expectations due to our rapid client acquisition and strong revenue growth. Cantor. "Fitzgerald wants to lead the round," Rebecca informed me during our afternoon check-in. $20 million at a $65 million pre-money valuation. The number should have thrilled me, but Nathan's threats had cast a shadow over what should have been a moment of triumph. "Any concerns about the potential legal complications?" "We've been transparent with all potential investors. Arya's continued support and our documentation of corporate governance have mitigated most concerns." She hesitated. There is a time factor, though. We need to close within the next 4 weeks to maintain momentum. I nodded, understanding the implied pressure. The standoff with Nathan needed resolution before it impacted our funding round. That evening, returning home, I found Nathan waiting in the living room, a glass of his expensive scotch in hand. His expression was unreadable. "I've reviewed your proposal with my attorneys," he said without preamble. "They believe I have a stronger claim than you acknowledge." "And what do they think about the professional and personal repercussions of pursuing that claim?" I asked, remaining standing. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "They suggest it would be complicated for all parties." Indeed. A long silence stretched between us, filled with calculations and reassessments. "I want a different title," he said finally. "Senior investment strategist, and double the compensation package. The title is negotiable. The compensation is not." I kept my voice neutral, recognizing that we were finally engaging in an actual negotiation rather than posturing. Fine. And I wanted understood that this arrangement is transitional. As I demonstrate value, we revisit my role and compensation. Performance reviews are standard for all positions at manufacturing. Your role would be no exception. He nodded slowly, some internal battle visibly resolving. "Then we have a deal." I should have felt relief, but instead felt only a hollow certainty that this compromise marked the beginning of the end of our marriage. Nathan hadn't accepted my worth or his own limitations. He had simply recognized that his leverage was weaker than he'd initially calculated. "There's one more thing," I added. "This agreement is contingent on our personal separation. I'll be filing for divorce regardless of your role with the company." His eyes widened slightly. "You're ending our marriage over this?" "I'm acknowledging that our marriage ended the moment you threatened to destroy something I built rather than celebrate its success." He looked away, unable to dispute the truth of that assessment. "And if I refuse the consulting position entirely?" "Then we proceed with the legal path, but I don't think either of us wants that." After another long moment, he nodded. "Have your attorneys draft the final agreement. I'll move my things to the club until we figure out next steps." As he walked out the door, I felt no triumph, only the quiet certainty that I had protected what mattered while accepting the necessary end of what no longer served either of us. 3 months later, Manufactory closed its Series A round, $25 million at a $70 million pre-money valuation. The press release announcing the funding listed me as founder and CEO, with no mention of Nathan's consulting role, a deliberate omission he had initially protested, but eventually accepted as part of our negotiated agreement. Our divorce proceeded. With surprising civility, Nathan having recognized that a contentious battle would damage his professional reputation more than mine. The consulting arrangement proved unexpectedly sustainable. He maintained the connection to manufacturing that preserved his pride, while I maintained the control and independence necessary for the company's continued growth. In a strange twist, Nathan's role eventually evolved into something genuinely valuable. Free from the distorting dynamics of our marriage, his financial expertise found appropriate expression in specific projects where his background actually mattered. We developed a professional relationship governed by clear boundaries and mutual respect, something our personal relationship had always lacked. 1 year after the night Nathan had laughed at my $1 million idea, I stood on stage at the Women in Tech Summit, accepting an award for Emerging Entrepreneur of the Year. Manufactory now served over 500 small manufacturers across North America, with a valuation exceeding $200 million and a workforce of nearly 100 employees. "The most valuable lesson I've learned," I told the audience during my acceptance speech, "is that true worth isn't determined by others' assessments. When someone tells you what you can't do, what you don't know, or what you're not qualified for, that's not the end of your story. It might just be the beginning." From the back of the ballroom, I caught a glimpse of Nathan watching, his expression unreadable. We nodded to each other briefly, acknowledgement between former spouses, between consultant and CEO, between two people who had reached an unexpected equilibrium after the collapse of their personal connection. Later, at the reception, he approached me with a cocktail napkin in hand. "What's this?" I asked as he handed it to me. "The name of someone you should meet. He runs a consortium of aerospace subcontractors looking for exactly what manufacturing offers." I studied him, trying to understand this evolved version of the man who had once dismissed me so casually. "Thank you. That's helpful." He shrugged, a ghost of his old charm surfacing. "Just doing my job. Senior investment strategist, remember?" "I remember everything, Nathan." His smile faltered, acknowledgement flickering in his eyes. "For what it's worth, I was wrong. About your idea. About you." "I know." I tucked the napkin into my clutch. "But I didn't build manufactory to prove you wrong. I built it because it needed to exist, and I was the one who saw that clearly." As he walked away, I felt a final weight lifting. Not forgiveness exactly, but a release from needing either his approval or his regret. My worth had never depended on his assessment. The company thriving without his input was proof enough. Yuki Kimura appeared at my elbow, champagne flutes in hand. "Interesting exchange. Are you all right?" I accepted the offered glass with a genuine smile. "Better than all right. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "To manufacturing's continued success," she toasted, "and to the woman who never needed anyone's permission to create something extraordinary." We clinked glasses, the sound crystalline and satisfying, like the breaking of old limitations and the celebration of newfound strength. "To seeing clearly," I amended, "both the obstacles and the possibilities." As we turned to greet other guests, I caught a final glimpse of Nathan slipping out a side door, no longer central to my story, but a character who had inadvertently catalyzed my most important transformation. From a woman who accepted his dismissal, to one who built something remarkable despite it, the company he had laughed at, the vision he couldn't see, the worth he had failed to recognize until it became impossible to deny. Sometimes the loudest laughter precedes the most profound silence, and sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage of all. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.